Morning, we're preparing for an MOT on the Thruxton. So what I do know is I need to swap my brake pads, so I'll cover that in detail. Got it hooked up to me Abbas Skylift. This has got the cruiser mount on it to lift the bike up, and I know a lot of you will say you can't actually use the standard mount, which is here. These bits and pieces form the standard mount that clamps on the swing arm. You can use that on a Thruxton, but you end up stripping a load of bits off to get at it. So I had some spare cash and there was an offer on the cruiser lift, so I bought it. Looking at the rear caliper, I think the back wheel has to come off to change these pads. I've not done it before, so I'm going to loosen the back wheel off before we lift this thing up. I actually find a 1 1/16 Imperial socket fits that rear nut better than the metric equivalent, which has play on it, so that's what I use. Don't know what other people find, that's certainly my experience. Right, let's get this thing up in the air. And when you're using one of these, always put your safety pin in and then lower the bike so it's resting on that pin and not the jack. And we're going to start by taking the back wheel off. Right, rear wheel's off. This beastie is what we're tackling next. See there, quite rusty and corroded, need a good clean. Right, to get the pads out, we've got to undo these two Allen keys. Always check on the back to see if there's any retaining clip, which there isn't. Bit of Loctite on there, and then we'll give all this a clean. Check the pistons, but you can see they're on the limit of being worn. Those pads definitely on the limit. Tiny bit of the wear marker there, we'll get them swapped. Right, so I just hooked the caliper back on here to get some leverage, and we've cracked those pins open, so now we'll remove them. Once they're undone, just pull them out, and you can see there's corrosion on there, so they'll need a good clean up. And that's the other pin, and the brake pads have fell out, so you can see there hardly any meat left on. These are the wear markers, so they're still visible, so that's why I think that would be marginal on an MOT. Right, we're going to give the whole caliper a clean. So I'm just using a brake and parts cleaner on here, squirting it in there, giving it a brush over with a stiff brush for now, and then I'm going to pop the pots out a little bit further in a second or two. Right, so I just lay a pair of spanners in there, and that allows me to push the pots out without the risk of them coming all the way out. I have made that mistake before and it's messy. You can see the nice shiny bit that hasn't been protruded out, which means I can clean all of that. Right, so that's nice and clean now. So we need to push those pots back now. Again, it's the same thing. I'll use 2 spanners, and I'll just use the spanners to push them back, because if you push one in, the other one will come out and you'll be in a world of pain. So use the spanners to push them back in. You can get a tool, but spanners work fine. My method for cleaning the pins is to put my drill with a wire brush on into my workmate, use that to get it spinning, and then just brush this off. So I'll get that done and come back when they're finished. So that is the pins cleaned up. That's the new brake pads in, and you can see there's absolutely no gap, so I need to do a bit of work on still pushing those pistons in a bit further. Well, there's a little bit of play there, but not enough for a disc. So you've got some copper grease, and we're going to put that on the pins, and we're going to put a dab of Loctite just on the ends to stop, as that helps the brake pads slide along here, which is how, when your brake is released, they stop binding. There must be a slide along these. You've just got a thin layer of copper grease, and then we pop this back in here, pushing on the pads, and then before we screw them home, we're just going to put a tiny dab of Loctite on them. So that's all cleaned up. There's a decent enough gap on them pads, hopefully to get it over the disc. So now we'll put the wheel back on. Right, that's the axle greased. You can make fitting your wheel really easy by dropping the height so everything lines up. You don't have to hold the wheel, just put everything in position, line it up, lower the wheel in, and then we can pop the axle in, no bother. So I just need to lift it up, get the chain back on, tighten it all up, adjust the chain, and that's the rear of the bike sorted out. Right, on here we've got these two Allen bolts. These are 8mm, and we're going to crack them off and take the caliper off. Right, once that's off, we just give this a side to side wiggle to loosen it off, which will let us take the brake pad off. There's some clips here, so I'm going to see if I can undo the ABS sensor from these just pop off. Remember to put them on, but it just means you don't have to worry about your ABS sensor. And that is the caliper off. You see those pads still have quite a bit of wear on them, but we're going to change them anyhow. So I've looked at the caliper and I cannot find any screws, but looking at the pads there ain't any, so I literally just push them to the middle and then they pop out. And although there's still a good millimetre on there, we're going to swap those. There we are, and out it comes. So we'll clean the caliper up like we did before. We'll put some spanners in there, pull the brake on to get the pistons out and give them a clean. This is something that you need to do after winter as well. If you've been riding in winter, you need to give your brakes a good clean to make them work properly. Right, I've put cloth around the brake reservoir and I've just loosened the cap, because you'll need to keep an eye on that when you're pushing the pistons back in, because every time you top your brake fluid up, you're doing it with the state of the pads. Because we've got new pads with more meat on them, we're going to push them back further, so there'll be more fluid. So we'll just put that on there to catch any that comes out, and we'll sort that out after, but we'll keep an eye on it. You don't want brake fluid anywhere near your paint. That's caliper clean and the pot's pushed fully in. These are the new pads. Now that's a part that moves, that's a part that moves, and that's a part that moves. So I'm going to very carefully put some copper slip, not a lot, because I don't want it going on the pads, just enough to make sure that they're not going to seize. Okay, that's the pads back in. Now just going to pop that back on the bike. So we're doing exactly the same on this side. I'll clean all those up. I'll come back to you when that's back on the bike, and then we'll show you how to torque it up and align the brakes. Because we've had the pistons pushed right in, we need to pull on that brake until that firms up. And that pushes the pistons home. We can now tighten that up and align the front caliper. Right, the front caliper bolts need to be 55 Newton meters, but before you tighten them up, you need to apply the brake. So I've got the calipers so that there's a bit of movement. They're not loose, but there's a bit of movement. And I'm going to pull the brake on, keep the brake on, and then when we tighten up those bolts, we know the right fit to the disc. They're aligned with the disc. So to clamp the brake on, I'm just going to use one of these little clips, wrap it round there and pull the brake handle with it. Next job, tighten up the wheel, 110 Newton meters. And these pins are 8 Newton meters. Which is not very tight at all. You'll feel the resistance build up as the pistons hit the pads, and then it's a good idea to check your fluid levels. Right, another one in the garage. So if you're interested in tinkerings in garages, driving around the northeast of England and further, then why not hit the subscribe button. If you're already a subscriber, thank you very much. Gordon from Up North Biker, gonna have a wash and a sit down. Cheers, bye.